with the folks, all sorts of people are writing to me that they have other things, conflict and stuff like that. But again, appreciate that's one of the kids. No matter how often you tell them, do something. No, somebody else. I mean, they're gone. Uh, it seems like every week we tell the kids I do something between 10 and 12. That phone will ring and it could be them. So right now it's probably somebody trying to convince me to vote for somebody I won't vote for. But again, appreciate everybody joining us. Let me let somebody else in from the waiting room. Uh, really happy to have Susie here with us. As I was mentioning earlier, her book I really enjoyed. She had reached out to me to get some historical information for these 3940 World's Fair, and I was really impressed. That's got to be one of the kids, whoever it is. I got. Anyway, I was very impressed with the amount of historical detail she wove into it, but also the fact that it was a very lively story with characters I felt were relatable. I was very pleased to see that Susie actually has quite a extensive list of books that have been very well received. I'm very jealous because she could keep getting awards and awards and awards, and very, very prestigious. So I'd like to turn it over to Susie. I'd ask people if you have questions, if you could hold it to the end. She'll talk about her book and then her collections and stuff. And then at the end of it, I have some extra 1939-40 photos that folks might enjoy. So again, Susie, appreciate you joining us.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Yeah, I actually, used your research when I was writing the book, and also licensed some photographs from you that appear. So this is the book. Oh, I didn't change mine to my screen settings. Everything's backwards, but that's okay. But yeah, in fact, even the first, I include some photos at the front of the book, and the first one, the Trilon and the Perisphere, I got, it says courtesy of Bill Cotter. So yeah, we were in touch pretty early on, and then I thought of you as kind of this World's Fair celebrity. And then I was doing an event a couple weeks ago for the Flushing Meadow Corona, the Friends, the Alliance for, and Bill showed up, and I saw him in one of the little squares, and I was like, oh my gosh, we have a celebrity in our midst. And so, and then Bill came on and spoke a little bit, and is able to give such great historical perspective that, I know what I think is quite a bit about the World's Fair, but certainly not as much as he and probably some of you. So, and it's nice to have that world historical perspective along with it. So thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be in this crew. You're probably my most informed and educated crew on the World's Fair, so I can kind of get by with, maybe not having everything perfect for the other people I speak to. So pardon me if I make any mistakes, and I appreciate any corrections at the end. So I'm going to take you all through a brief presentation about the book. And then Bill's going to speak, and we're all going to open it up for questions. And I love a lively, engaged conversation. So definitely pipe in then. And you're welcome to either put your questions into the chat, or we can do it live, however y'all typically do it. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen right now and pull up my presentation. It's so unglamorous how they do this in Zoom. Okay, we came here to shine. That's the cover of the book. And what I'm gonna do right now is take you all, hold on, because for some reason, this is not letting me, okay. Interesting, there we go. I'm going to take you all back a little bit of a time travel and take you back to 1939. It's April 30th, opening day, a day that people have been looking forward to for years, since 1935, when the idea for the World's Fair was brought to a group of businessmen, and Grover Whalen formed the Fair Corporation and decided that they were going to have a World's Fair of 1939 as a way really to stimulate the economy of New York after the Depression. And it was a day that everyone around the country and everyone around the world anticipated. And it all started on this wonderful site, this prestigious site, which F. Scott Fitzgerald in The Great Gatsby called a Valley of Ashes, a fantastic farm where ashes grow like wheat into the ridges and hills and grotesque gardens bounded on one side by a small foul river. So an auspicious beginning for what would become the largest and most expensive World's Fair to ever have been put on at its time. And as you can see, they broke ground in 1936 at a ceremony. And over the next few years, construction ensued. And here you can see the Trilon and Perisphere frames are in the center with the government, the Constitution Mall going kind of down to 7 o'clock over there, with the amusement zone there on the left, and the automotive zone kind of up at 2-3 o'clock up there. Here is a picture of the Trilon and Perisphere being framed. And the Perisphere is, the Trilon, sorry, is always listed as 700 feet, but it really, I think, ended up being around 615 feet due to time and budget. So here we have a picture of the entire World's Fair now from the other perspective, where Constitution Mall is heading up to 2 o'clock and the automotive zone is down at the bottom, all finished. And on April 30th, 1939, we have FDR himself opening the fair with a wonderful speech, which you can see on YouTube. Eleanor's off there to the right. You can, pictures of you all are blocking it, but it was quite an important event with men in top hats and thousands of people in attendance on a dreary day. And that became the World's Fair. There was an investment of $160 million, which is in today's $3 billion in today's money. And the opening day coincided with the 150th anniversary of the inauguration of George Washington. So it is in this setting that my novel, We Came Here to Shine, is set. The novel focuses on two main characters. Vivi is inspired by these photos, two of which you can see on the right are Esther Williams, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. But my character Vivi is early 20s, and she is, at the opening of the book, about to start her first starring role in a Hollywood picture out in LA, when the studio head plucks her off the set and tells her he's sending her to New York City to star in Billy Rose's Aquacade. The conceit is that Eleanor Holm, who really was the star of the 1939 Aquacade in New York, which was the synchronized swimming spectacular show, the conceit is that she is injured and they need somebody to fill in. And the studio head that Vivi works for is friends with Billy Rose. And so Billy Rose asks for a favor to send out his big star. And so Vivi goes to New York, the last place she wants to be, not only because she thinks it'll be detrimental to her career, but also because she has family history in New York that she does not want to revisit. And so the story with Vivi is how she becomes acclimated to the Aquacade, how there are tons of challenges in her way in terms of learning the role, and also the men who are supposed to be helping her in her career, and how she then stands up against that. My second character is Max, and Max, you can see, is inspired very much by Katharine Hepburn and Emma Stone. She is a plucky journalism student at NYU who's in her junior year, and she is selected to be part of this very prestigious cohort program where the professor assigns them summer internships. And Max only wants to work for the New York Times. She envisions herself a very serious journalist, but instead her professor places her at Today at the Fair, which many of you probably know was an actual newspaper at the World's Fair. Max is very disappointed because she thinks this is, again, like Vivi, going to be detrimental to her career. And she hates fairs, and her boss at Today at the Fair does not allow her to write articles, only allows her to write event listings. So Max and Vivi are in the same kind of boat. They end up meeting, and that's where the fun ensues, with the two of them creating a plan to get their way in the world, that they to realize their personal and professional dreams. The third character of the book is really the New York World's Fair itself. And I take the reader behind the scenes of all the glamour and the intrigue and the history, the fascinating architecture of the World's Fair itself, which I became enamored with when I started doing my research. So how did I come up with the idea for this novel? This is my fourth published novel. My first two were commercial contemporary women's fiction. On Grace is about a woman turning 40 and returning to the workplace. And The Balance Project is a novel about work-life balance from a fictional perspective. My third book is called The Subway Girls, and that is historical fiction about the Miss Subways program, which was a advertising program in the New York City subway system from 1941 to 1976 that was essentially a beauty contest. So my 2018 novel, The Subway Girls, is about a young woman competing to become Miss Subways with an alternating modern day storyline of a female advertising executive pitching the MTA account, coming across the historic Miss Subways program, and the two storylines end up intersecting. So I really loved writing historical fiction, and I knew I wanted to write my fourth novel as historical fiction. And it was while reading Esther Williams' autobiography, The $1 Million Mermaid, that my idea came to me. So I'm reading The $1 Million Mermaid, and Esther Williams is 19 years old, and she is called by Billy Rose to audition for his aquacade that was going to be held in 1940, summer of 1940, at the World's Fair in San Francisco, which is called, Bill, correct me here, the Treasure Island. Okay. And I think that was not actually a BIE sanctioned world exposition, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's right. It was the Golden Gate International Exposition, but they did not go and get the BIE approval. They didn't want to get into a big contest against New York, and but yeah, she was a very sought out star for that.
Yeah. So I'm reading this autobiography, and she's saying she's going to star in the aquacade, and I see that word, and I've never heard that word before. So I go and I look it up, and I learned that the aquacade, which, as I said, was a synchronized swimming spectacular by Billy Rose, was the highest grossing attraction at the 1939 New York World's Fair. It started in 37 in St. Louis, and I think that's right, and then became this big production in 1939. And I was smitten, and I thought, wow, what if I take some characters and plop them down in this setting at the World's Fair, at the aquacade, and see what happens? Because I'm fascinated by stories of women, especially fascinated by stories of women from the middle of the last century, and how ambitious they were, and how they were trying to how they butt up against these restrictions and these constructs and constrictions that society and their families and their teachers and they themselves put upon themselves to halt those ambitions. So that is where I got the idea for the story. As I said, I was fascinated by the aquacade, which was a multi-million-dollar production. It had innovations in its lights, in the water fountains. It was a huge, I think it was a 300-foot long pool with a stage in the back and in the front. There were two diving towers, one on either side, with a glee club in one and an orchestra in the other, and seating for 10,000 people. And there were 4 shows a day. So I knew that if I could use that as a setting for part of my novel, that the story would just be so vibrant and have so much to tell. And then I was very excited to find that there actually was a daily newspaper at the World's Fair, because I really wanted to make my second character a journalist, which Max is. A couple reasons I wanted to make my second main character a journalist. One, I am fascinated by female journalists and how they have evolved over, throughout the years. In the early 1900s, female journalists were really writing for the women's pages about interior design and cooking and gardening and child rearing, because that's what the newspaper editors thought women were interested in, and all that they thought women were capable of writing. They also did research. They were foreign war correspondents. And then there are stories like Nellie Bly's where they went undercover. And I just thought it would be really interesting to write about a female journalist and how ambitious she was and how much she wanted to write real news and all of the obstacles that were placed in her way. And so when I learned, because I went on eBay to buy some memorabilia, when I learned that there was an actual daily paper of the fair, it cemented it for me, and I thought it would be fun. The other reason I wanted to have a journalist in the story is because it allowed me to have articles, and articles are a great way in a novel to include exposition about what was going on. And so to have it be seamless that way, I thought was really exciting. Don't know why this isn't working. Okay, so the research that I did, here we have a bunch of the books, not all, but many of the books that I used to research. I started with books. I started with newspaper articles, magazine articles, to learn all that I could about the fair. As you can see on the top, there's Billy Rose's autobiography, which is quite a delightful and entertaining read. He was really a character and really a great writer. So that was fun. I also wanted to study the Hollywood studio system. So there are some books there in the middle. For those of you who are looking at the Tom Hanks book and wondering what that's all about, he wrote a book of short stories, and one of his short stories is set at the 1939 fair. Good Girls Revolt by Lynn Povich is about women in journalism, I think in the 70s, which was the factual story about the women at Newsweek who were the researchers who wanted to be given credit as journalists. And then you see Esther Williams' book there. And then I have tons of books with photographs and stories about the World's Fair. I also studied this website, which is 1939 NewYorkWorld'sFair.com, which for those of you who are interested in the fair and who don't know about this website, I highly recommend it. It's got tons and tons and tons of information, and I was able to get some additional information about different pavilions and the different zones, and there's also a wonderful archive of Today at the Fair papers. So I own 2 papers myself, but there are about 15 or 20 newspapers there that I was able to read through to really get a sense of all of the events that went on and the day-to-day of the fair, but also kind of the voice that was used for the articles, so that when I wrote myself articles that appear in the book, I was able to get that right. I also watched a lot of videos. So on the left, there's a screenshot from one of the Medicus films. And in his first reel, I think there are 17 reels. In the first reel, there's some wonderful footage of the aquacade. So that was really helpful for me to see some of the performances. There is no audio on any of these, but you just to be able to get a sense of what it was like to see what it looked like at the time, what people wore, how vast and massive the fair was, the buses that ran through the fair. Just to get those visuals was really helpful as I crafted my story. And then, of course, the Middleton family at the World's Fair, which was basically a Westinghouse information vehicle, but really a lot of people say it was a propaganda vehicle. It's interesting to read some of the historic perspective of the Middleton family video, but I took it for what it at face value, which was a really interesting tour of the fair, and also of some of the Westinghouse sites, which were some of my favorite and some of them of the most popular at the fair, including the robot and the time capsule, which I'm just obsessed with. Oops. I also went a little nuts on eBay and bought a ton of memorabilia, including a bunch of lots of postcards, including some that were already filled out. And that was really neat to read what people wrote to their friends and family back home. There's some really interesting things, and just to look at the handwriting, and yes, I smell them. I think they smell really great. And so that was kind of fun. I bought some costume jewelry, including I'm wearing a pickle pin here. And this, I bought one original pickle pin, I have a picture, and then a bunch of fake ones. And then I also have here my Trilon and Perisphere pin. And I bought all these hoping that for my book tour this summer, I would be able to display this all and wear them. But of course, there was no in-person book tour, which was fine. I did it all virtual. I bought an actual guidebook from the fair. And this was also helpful because most of the books that I read were historic books about the fair, but this is, you know, at the time, what they were writing about the fair from the fair corporation itself, how they wanted to present everything. And so that was kind of helpful to see the juxtaposition of how the fair presented itself versus how it was written about. And then, of course, my Today at the Fair papers. I bought a actual program from the Aquacade. which looks like this. And it's pretty long, and it's got advertisements in it, and it's got biographies of the different stars, including Johnny Weissmuller and Eleanor Holm, and some of the other people, along with the crew members who worked on the fair, Morton Downey, people like that. So it's interesting to see that. Of course, my pickle pen. And for those of you who don't know, Heinz, at the Heinz Dome, which was their pavilion, they gave out these pickle pens, and it was the most popular souvenir of the fair. And they used them for multiple events, not just the 1939 fair. And a lot of times when I give a talk, people will say that they found one of these in a jewelry box of a great aunt or a great uncle or a grandparent, and they never knew really what it was. And so that's really great. And the best part of my research was actually going to the fair grounds themselves. So as you all probably know, Flushing Meadows, Corona Park, Queens is where the fair was held. There's so very little left from 1939. Of course, all of the big architectural remnants are from 64, 65. Although there is some stuff left, obviously Fountain Lake there that you can see in the top left picture. And the New York building, which was served as the UN for a while, and I know Bill can talk about that, and is now the Queen's Museum, which has a wonderful permanent display of memorabilia from the World's Fair. But this is a man who took me around. He is a private guide that the Flushing Meadows Alliance people asked to tour me around. And it was just really neat to walk the footprint of the fair, to really feel how massive it was and how far away it would have been for Vivi, my character working at the Aquacade, to walk over to the administration building where Max would have been working at Today at the Fair, and how long it would have taken them to walk to the Italian pavilion for dinner, and where the Turf Trilon Cafe was that they went for a drink. So it was really neat to walk in those footsteps of not only my characters, but of the millions of people who attended the fair itself. So that was very exciting. Here is just a layout for those of you who are less familiar with the fair. Here's a layout of the 7 zones that are all color coded. Of course, the communication zone in the left in green, at the bottom is the automotive zone in gray, the amusement zone on the right in yellow. And I have so many different maps of the fair. And one of my favorite things when reading a story in which the setting is important is having a map in the book. And I knew that I wanted to include a map for my readers. And so I looked at a bunch of maps, including this one as well. And this was an insert in the New Yorker magazine. And it's one of my favorite maps. I think it's really beautiful. But they would not give me the rights to reprint this, which ended up being a blessing because, as you can see, this is incredibly complicated and small to read and would not have reprinted well in a small paperback novel. So what I decided to do was commission an artist to design a map that would go into the beginning of my book. And what that allowed me to do is show that, yes, there were hundreds of buildings and this was a massive scale that this fair was put on, but also highlight only the buildings that were important to my story and in which my characters visited. And so I found an artist. She ended up being from Milan, Italy. And she and I communicated over several months where I expressed to her what was important in the map. She created the wayfinding strategy for the map itself, drew all of the illustrations. And this is the culmination of that work. And as you can see, it is the different black flags are labels for the buildings or sites that we wanted to highlight. And I've been told by many readers that they reference this map quite often while they're reading the book to just get a sense of place. And I just love how it turned out. You can see over there, I have a big blow up of the map that my friends got me for my birthday this year, which I thought is really cool. So that's the story of the custom map in the book. Here's just a picture of my desk on a typical day of writing. Bill, is that your book there? On the bottom left?
Yes, yeah, I was going to cut you off when my book wasn't in your stack of books.
I know, I noticed that. And this isn't even planned. I mean, this was actually like a day of, I'm going to have to reshoot that picture. I didn't have a lot of my actual World's Fair books in there, but this is, now you can see, like, I used your book, and this was a typical day of writing for me, where I would have books surrounding me, including a paper dictionary, because words are, definitions are better in a real dictionary than they are online. A paper dictionary. I would always have my manuscript open. And for those of you who are writers, I write in Scrivener, which is really a magnificent platform. And I can talk about that. But then I'd also have some historic site open on my computer. I have a big screen, and then books in front of me, and several cups of tea. So this was a typical day of writing for me. And I can stop there, and we can talk about some of the history that Bill wants to mention. I have so much more to talk about. Let me just stop my share here. I have to press escape, that's why. Okay, there we go. We can, Bill, if you want to talk a little bit, and then we can get into questions.
No, I think I'd rather have go into questions right now because these people have all heard me, and we'll put them into comas. Again, I really appreciate you taking the time to do it, and I know some of the people here on the chat have bought and read the book. For those that haven't, again, I think I particularly enjoyed it. As Susie mentioned, things like the characters walking from point A to point B in the book. I thought it gave it a tremendous amount of depth that, for me, I actually felt like the characters were real and they existed, because they just didn't start at point A and end up at point B. There were a lot of comments about the things they were passing along the way. As I told her when we spoke in the last time, I also thought that the characters worked really well from a historical point of view, that they sounded like the women of the time as opposed to the women of today. The language, some of the wording, that sort of thing. And I thought the characters came across as very believable. So I know Beth has read the book. She just mentioned the other day that she just finished it. There's also Joey Vento on the call. Actually owns several pieces of the Aquacade building that he might be persuaded to drag out of hiding. So folks, again, everybody comes in muted, but if you go to the bottom left of your screen or use the space bar and unmute yourself, feel free to ask Susie any questions or any thoughts or observations you have.
Wait, Joey, talk to us about this. It's so fascinating.
Let's see. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was there when they decided they were going to demolish the Aquacade. I made sure that I was there every other day, and I have over 500 photographs of the site in different levels of demolition. And the construction guys actually let me go in when they tore out the cornerstone. And inside the cornerstone, and I've told this story many times, was a big black box. It looked like a big lead box that they threw to the side. And I waited and waited to find out what was in it. And I never did. They seem to have just pushed everything over to the side and I think it later all went into storage, all those wonderful reliefs, Art Deco reliefs that were there. But we managed to get a ton of bricks, a trunkload of bricks, which I built a barbecue grill out of, and a path walking up to my driveway.
Oh my God. Wait, sorry, I have to cut you off. Bill, someone keeps going into the waiting room. I don't know if you want to let them in or not.
But... No, I don't recognize the name. And
unfortunately, I didn't let him in because
because of Zoom bombers,
okay,
right. This late in the game.
Okay, sorry, Joey. I just didn't want to I wanted to make sure nobody was waiting. Okay.
Yeah,
please. Wow.
Yeah, and so we got a lot of stuff out of there. And this is I don't know if you could see this. This is one of the seat backs.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and we got a lot of these, and for younger people that don't know, or certain guests that we have, they may not know the 1939 Aquacade. So I just tell them it's a piece of a deck chair from the Titanic.
Do you know if the chairs from 64, 65 were the same from 39, 40?
Yeah.
Yes, they were. Yeah. Yeah. So, but that's our story. And if you ask Bill, Bill will tell you that I've looted the Flushing Meadow Park for I think as much as anyone could. So
What did you say was in the black box?
I don't know what was in the black box, whether it was some sort of a time capsule maybe they put in there. I'm not sure if there was a ceremony for that originally, but they threw it to the side, and I didn't get a photo of it, but I got a few photographs that actually made the New York Newsday that was popular here. I don't know if they publish anymore.
So where did the black box go? Where'd the black box end up?
I think a lot of the reliefs that they took down went into storage. I believe in the old post office building, which they stored a lot of stuff in. I don't think they have anything there now. We actually got in the old post office, our little group, and there's nothing in there but really park supplies like paints and uniforms and stuff like that. But I don't know where the reliefs went. They were beautiful. They had reliefs on both sides, I believe, of tragedy and comedy.
They're on the current refreshment stand.
Those are mock-ups. And that's where they also managed to put down the wrong year for the fair. So yeah, as Joey said, they hauled it away, and this stuff goes into somewhere in the New York City's, wherever they're the black boxes in the black hole. For example, over in the 39 fair, they had a big marble disc or tower that stood over the time capsule. They took that down for the 64 World's Fair. There were pictures of it sitting in a storage yard, and then it's since disappeared. Now, where does a 10-foot tall, disc like that go? Well, it's gone somewhere. So it's like Citizen Kane. Maybe it will show up someplace someday. Joey, do you have any extra bricks left from the Aquacade?
Yeah, I have some, sure.
So maybe you can work out with some with Susie if she needs a paperweight.
I actually left you a message, Susie, that I would love for you to have one. If
I will love to be in touch with you about that. That's so cool.
Yeah, I went back to New York the first time I met Joey. I came back and gave a talk, and he gave me one of the bricks. And I had just gone with carry-on luggage. When I got back to the airport to come home, put it through the X-ray machine. They were like, "Why do you have a brick?" And I had a promise I wasn't going to try to assault anybody on the cabin of the airplane with my brick. But I still have my brick. Thanks, Joey.
You're welcome.
Cool. Joey, I'll send you my my email address and we can chat afterwards.
Sure, that would be wonderful. Thank you, Susie.
Thank you.
Well, Joey, if you were able to swipe some bricks, weren't you tempted to swipe the black box too?
Oh no, they were actually watching me when I went in there because there was a lot of Art Deco like sconces. They looked like they were on the side of the building. I think they were part of the flagpoles, and from a distance they looked very small and removable. But when you got really up close to them, they were huge. There was no way I was going to get out of the park with that one.
How big was the black box though?
The black box was probably, I would say the size of like a small, one of those small storage boxes that you can just put stuff in. It was like the size of a big storage box. And they kicked it. The guy actually kicked it. So it looked as though it didn't have any weight to it. So if there was anything inside, maybe it was paper. I'm not sure.
Joey, if you open up that box, out is going to come this frog with this top hat and cape. Michigan J Frog.
Bill, I like Scott's question. Where's
Yeah.
Scott? Let me find you in here. About an overlay, like what? There's Scott. Hi, Scott. About the overlay showing the footprint of 3940 to 6465.
Yeah, the Queens Museum for a while had a walking tour map that would show you where things were. So I think it was in 1989. I have one somewhere in my collection. I have to find it. I had gone back in '89 for an anniversary event at the fair. And of course, to me, the 64 fair was the big thing. My mom had remembered a lot about the 39 fair. And they did have a map that you could walk out. And matter of fact, if we get to the pictures I have, you'll see, you know, some things where you say, oh, here's the so and such pavilion. That's right where the New York pavilion is today. That sort of thing. So I do have an overlay map that's somewhere, which I will try to find, and it is very interesting because again, it's all a matter of perspective. You know, to me, oh, this is the General Electric pavilion. Oh no, for somebody for the 39 fair, total different experience.
I do know that zones were innovative for the 3940 fair. That I think if what I read was correct, that was the first fair where they actually categorized the buildings by category and had zones, which was different at the time. And so that's kind of interesting. And I do know obviously that the theme center stayed in the same place, but and there's still, you know, there's still all the roads are the same, the roads and where Constitution Mall was. So that's interesting. Thank you for that question.
Yeah, the zones is interesting because a lot of people ask, how on earth did Westinghouse end up in the federal and state zone for the 64 World's Fair? Well, it's because that had been the industrial, you know, zone where they had buried the time capsule in 39. So, you know, Westinghouse couldn't move to where all the other industrial exhibits were going in 64. They had to stay where all the other states were going to be.
And now, for those of you who are interested, there is still a memorial. I mean, a whatever to the two time capsules are in one place, buried together, and in a very inauspicious area. I'm going to skip Carlos for 1 second and go to Beth. And that's so great that you read Fiona's book. Fiona's a very dear friend of mine, and she actually did my launch day event where she interviewed me, and I love her writing. And yes, The Lions of Fifth Avenue is a wonderful book. And for those of you who like historical fiction, Fiona writes her books set at New York City landmark buildings. So her first book was set at the Barbizon Hotel, the Barbizon apartment building, which was a place where young women could live alone in New York City. And then she wrote about the Dakota apartment building, which is fascinating, the Chelsea Hotel, and Grand Central. And this one is set at the New York Public Library, and it's just wonderful. It's such an interesting book. So yeah, I will let her know that one of my attendees has read her book. And now, Carlos, do you want to talk to us about your dad? That's so cool. Which fair, 39 or 64?
No, the 39 fair.
Oh, wow.
But he was a very proud employee of Westinghouse. And so every time they went to the fair, they of course had to go to the Westinghouse Pavilion. And my mother was an avid video camera user. So there's a lot of film, you know, some of it very shaky, but just it's really neat to see my mother, my aunt, my two oldest sisters having, you know, just the time of their lives at the fair.
Have you ever thought of putting it onto YouTube?
No, I suppose I could.
Yeah, I bet Carol could do that for you. She's film whiz. Yeah, it's pretty easy to do. That's so neat though, that you have that wonderful family history. Do they talk about electro and seeing the time capsule and all that?
Well, I wasn't even born yet. And so by the time I became a New York World's Fair fan, I never spoke to my father about the previous fair. So
I actually have some pictures of folks who'd like to see it that I've newly restored that include Westinghouse. So as folks like to see some 39 pictures for a moment?
Yeah, and then Richard Herring has some really interesting things to share too.
Okay, let me come here. I have to come back and share the screen. What I had done was I had grabbed a bunch of pictures and just threw them into a folder so that they're gonna kind of bounce around from subject to subject real quick. But started, and Westinghouse is mixed in with these others. So the fire department in New York had a major historical exhibit outside the New York City building, and they brought in all sorts of antique fire equipment. My grandfather was a New York City fire department battalion chief, so this stuff was of particular interest to him. So again, these are not in any particular order because as I restore them, I'll number them. You know, picture 01, 0, and through these all together, a lot of 01s. So the George Washington statue. People having a long day at the fair, very tired, you know, it's kind of relaxing and stuff. The giant cash register that had the attendance for the day, 83,509 people that particular day. The railroads on parade show, but here, or at Westinghouse, somebody took a picture of this mannequin with her plexiglass skirt that I don't know why on earth Westinghouse was predicting that women would wear plastic transparent skirts, but this was part of their display. DuPont had this major chemical tower, and you could go and see nylon being made and all sorts of odds and ends.
And nylon was introduced at the fair.
Yeah, it was a real big thing. Again, back to the fire department, one of their new modern ambulances. The USSR was there, just some general overview of the fair. The Pennsylvania exhibit, the Avenue of Power, back to the, I love this one, the old lantern on the back of the fire wagon.
Wait, I also think it's interesting for people who don't know, and Bill, you probably know a little bit more about this, but in the where the states, if you go back to what state was that? Pennsylvania. Those were only the buildings in the area where the states were the only buildings that were allowed to be replicas.
Right.
Everything else had to be new architecture.
Yeah, and a lot of these were actually built on the blueprints or using historical photos of the original state buildings. So in some cases, things like Liberty Hall still exists in Pennsylvania, but in others, you know, maybe Delaware or one others, their state house had been torn down, rebuilt, and they came back and went to an older look. I just got a kick out of this one. And one of the things I love about the pictures of the fair, and again, with Susie's book that's nice, is the style and elegance that's portrayed through the thing. People just, you know, they went to the fair dressed in their best. You know, they didn't just go in jeans. This lady's, you know, carrying her white gloves. She's got her hat. I mean, it's people really went for a day of style at the fair.
Kind of like how we used to go on airplanes, right?
Yes, right. We're inside the Ford Pavilion. We'll get back to Westinghouse in just a second. This was a giant exhibit of all of the material that would be changed into a car. And you could see little rivers of molten steel and how they would hand sew the leather for the seats and everything. Again, more fire trucks. We're going to get back to Westinghouse. I was doing a bunch of Ford stuff recently, so we have a bunch of that. Come on, we'll get to Westinghouse. I know it's, here we are, Westinghouse. So again, major exhibit here at the fair. And they had Westinghouse. It's hard to believe they don't exist today, but they were a big company with industrial turbines and electric power and all sorts of things. So they had exhibits in here that would show all their industrial might. And then they also went around showing you how they had changed life. And they had a very sexist display showing how life was changing for women, that they were making women's life so much better. But there was no hint whatsoever that a man could be doing anything like laundry or anything else. So lots of exhibits about how they had improved vacuum cleaners and washing machines and everything to make the woman's day that much shorter for her. So again, things have changed. And again, you can see here some of it. Women cooking, women doing cleaning, women doing kitchen work, women raising the kids. A sort of exhibit that today people would be coming out with the torches and the buckets of tar. So again, and then as mentioned off to the right, Electro, the robot. See again the planned electric kitchens, you know, and it's just a real picture of how life has changed over time. There's the plastic skirt again for the woman. Electro, the robot, this 39 view, because in 1940 Electro got himself a dog, Sparky the dog, that could come out. But you know, you would say Electro have a cigarette, and his ashtray's right in front of him. He would actually smoke a cigarette.
Bill and Susie, I find it very interesting that you can look up these people's skirts.
Yes.
They mounted them. It's kind of disgusting.
Yeah. Why they thought this was a good thing in 1939, I don't know. So
especially the one with the vinyl, with the plastic skirt.
yeah, that's
that one photo you showed.
yeah.
Look straight up at her private parts.
You know, when I first got out here to Hollywood, I was a new, very impressionistic kid from the East, and I got out here and I went over to Hollywood, and it's right to the proverbial Hollywood and Vine. I was outside of Capitol Records, and a woman actually walked down the street outside of Capitol Records wearing a see-through skirt, and you know, plastic, just like in the Westinghouse thing. And I had to, you know, call back to my family in New York and said, "Man, I am in the land of the Looney Tunes out here." You know, plus it's just the things to me, it's that thing had to be hot, you know. So anyway, I've got tons of pictures, as everybody knows, of the fair. But again, it was a great event, and I'll stop sharing here. Because again, Susie again is our guest star. Like folks, you know, Beth, you just finished the book. Any comments or thoughts you'd like to share?
Sure, I definitely enjoyed the book. I especially liked in the acknowledgments at the end when you mentioned plotting the demise of one of the characters with your sons around the dinner table. As a mother of boys, that definitely resonated with me. But so, how did you decide at what point in the book it made sense for the two characters to meet? Because in the first part of the book, it's these parallel stories, and then they come together. I think it's around chapter 16. Those two stories come together. How did you decide when to make that happen?
Yeah, thank you. And I won't give any spoilers. For those of you who haven't read the book who want to, I won't give any spoilers. And I also included a link to the book. If you're interested in purchasing it, I highly recommend you go to your local bookseller. They can get any book. But this is bookshop.org, which is this new company that is challenging Amazon, and they give a portion of every sale to independent booksellers. So I highly, highly recommend them, and you might even be able to find your local bookstore on that site. But thank you so much, Beth. And I really wanted them to meet because I thought that they had such different perspectives on life that it really gave a reader a different experience of what it was like for two different women who both kind of wanted the same things, but went about it from very different ways. And I just thought that the chemistry playing them up against each other, it's just a novel device, you know, to have two characters who have different viewpoints. And I knew they could help each other. One was, you know, where each strength and weakness, the other complemented that. And so I thought it would be really fun to have them meet and see what could happen in their friendship, but also how they could work together to solve their problems.
Right. And it seemed from the beginning that they were destined to meet at some point, but how did you decide like chapter 16 is the right place versus chapter 4?
Yeah, well, I wanted to establish each of their stories individually, so that the reader could become invested in each of the characters, start rooting for each of the characters, and then I just thought that's when it made sense. So it was really a plotting technique, you know, where in the middle I wanted that story beat to be for the pacing.
Okay.
I could have made it earlier. Probably couldn't have made it later,
Right.
I really wanted them each to have their initial conflicts and try to resolve them on their own before they met and then started working together. I think Richard, do you want to mention some of your cool stories?
Yeah, just a couple of weird things, because I've followed the 39 and 64 fair, and I was born about 2 miles away from the fairgrounds. But the time capsule was both for the 39, and I think there was also another one they put down there in 64.
Yes.
And I sought out where the capstone is on it a couple of years ago, and I had read that they wanted to make sure that the time capsules could be found no matter what happened to civilization and the Earth. And, until that time, thousands of years. And they printed up these instruction manuals about how to find it using something like a metal detection device, making a huge inductive loop and then looking in this general area. And I found one of those books in a library because they put them in special libraries to make sure that no matter what happened, you could find this thing and go back and get to the time capsule. So they really took it quite seriously, and it was
There's monasteries, libraries, I think colleges, and the Book of Record.
yeah. And the other thing, sorry, Bill.
The Book of Record in her book.
Okay, cool, very cool. The other thing is the Galertner book is kind of interesting. Galertner was a victim of the Unabomber, for one thing. And he also talks a little bit about what the Art Deco kind of period was in Manhattan there in 1939. And I found it fascinating because I was in an event in the Rainbow Room that he talks about, where in the late 30s, you could go up there, have a drink, and be in these elegant surroundings, look out the window and see the Trilonen's perisphere about, I guess it is 10 or 12 miles distant. And so I saw some of that, and the Rainbow Room is in a little bit of poor repair, but it's got the Art Deco hardwood and inlay and stuff that would have been absolutely cool in 39. And finally, I was on the fairgrounds at some point, and they had a special exhibit about Gertrude Ederle, whom you may have run into.
Oh yeah, she's in Trudy.
Yeah.
Here, I'll show you a picture of her because she's in the Aquacade program.
Yeah, who was the first woman to do the apparently the English Channel years before. So, and they had honored her at the Queen's Museum when I happened to on it.
And she had a ticker tape parade in New York.
Oh, cool. Very cool.
She came home.
All right, well, thanks.
Thank you.
Surely.
Questions?
With the time capsule, I think if they had said we're going to open up in 50 years or 100 years, it'd be one thing. But in 5,000 years, I know they use special paper for the books of record that's supposed to last and everything. In 5,000 years, everything is going to deteriorate. First of all, that whole area is probably going to be underwater. But the conceit that in 5,000 years we're going to go and find this is just most time capsules after 100 years, everything in them has decayed or people have forgotten where they are. So 5,000 years, good luck.
I wonder if there has ever been an effort launched to open them, say, in 2039 or some, you know what I mean, to 100 years as opposed to 5,000. I haven't heard anything about that, but.
No, I haven't either. And my fear is that if they open them up, they're not going to be in the shape that they thought they were. But it's actually interesting. Some people have done some amazing things with time capsules. And there was one a couple of years ago. I think it was about maybe 8-10 years ago. They were real excited. Some woman had been buried or she had buried a car, and they were going to dig the car up. And everybody had this expectation you were going to just put a battery and turn the key and drive away. So it was in some vault, I think in Oklahoma. And when they brought it up, it turned out the vault was nowhere near as watertight as they had thought. And the car was certainly not drivable. So, but 5,000 years, wow.
Yeah, I wonder also if who the governing body now is of those time machines, time capsules. Is it the Alliance for Flushing Meadows? Is it a company somewhere?
No, it'd be the New York City Parks Department. What also a lot of people don't realize too with the time capsules is that the granite marker that's there today is over the 39 time capsule. The 64 time capsules are actually about 8 feet away off to the side because they had gone off and they drilled the one hole to put the one down in 39. And then they had the marker, which is still there now. But then the other one, I've got pictures of the day, they dropped the 64, 65 one down its hole. and it's a little bit off to the side. So they actually went off and they printed additions to the book of record, telling everybody what they had stuck into the new time capsule, and amended the instructions to point out to everybody that when you find the first one, you have to go over there to look for the second one.
Oh my God.
So lots of planning.
Any other questions? Let's see.
Yeah, Susie, in your book, you were talking in the beginning, it was the Valley of the Ashes. Where did they move all those ashes to?
It was quite a demolition effort. I don't know where they moved the ashes to, but they certainly had to clear that area. Bill, do you know more about that?
They hauled it away.
Well, I know in other cities, they have the same problem with ashes. Philadelphia had an ash dump in the Logan section, and they forgot about the years of ashes. They built houses on them. And decades later, the houses started sinking and crumbling apart. If you go there today, they cleared up hundreds of houses, just empty fields. So that's in the northern, northeast section of Philadelphia. It's called the Sinking Homes of Logan.
If you look at the pictures back then, the Flushing River, the foul river they described, it was a very serpentine sort of thing. Today, they narrowed it down. So they used a lot of the stuff to basically take dirt out of one part of the river and then just put in the non-buildable stuff along the side of the river. But they also they didn't take it all away, because if they took it all away, there wouldn't have been anything there, because there's nothing there when they started putting it there. They hauled some of it away, some of it they compressed way down, and basically they took the ashes and piled dirt on top of it. So you've got bog down underneath, ashes in between, dirt on top, and that's why the area settles so much. And that's why footings from old pavilions and everything is still surfacing, because the entire area, when they started driving the pylons for the 64 World's Fair, they would hit them and they would just drop right out of sight, because everything underneath it is so unstable.
Yeah, that's true of all coal ash deposits.
Yeah, but it was quite a job that they did on it. Beth has made a comment about your cover. Maybe you'd like to chat about that.
Yeah, thank you, Beth. It is true. So many historical fiction covers today feature a woman's back. It's for a couple reasons. One, that seems to sell. And so the cover designers, whereas they want to be original, they also, they definitely use the marketing, the data of what sells. There was a thought at one point that if you show a woman's back instead of her face, you can make her look like whatever you want. Whereas if you show her face, then that's what the reader pictures. And a lot of times the book cover is meant to be evocative of the characters, not necessarily a representation of the characters exactly. So, but when I started getting cover designs from my cover designers, it's a whole long story. It took a few months. It was very disappointing. They were showing me women that they were modern photos, because I didn't have for my book, they didn't have budget for any custom original photography. So they had to use stock photography. And for some reason, they kept sending pictures using current models dressed up as if they were from that time period. But the hair was all wrong. The clothes were all wrong. At one point, they sent me a photo, a cover design with the Lifesavers parachute jump in it. But what they didn't realize is they were sending me a picture from Coney Island, where the parachute jump went after it was at the World's Fair. So at some point, I decided I needed to take this into my own hands. And I went onto the New York Public Library's archive of World's Fair photos. There's thousands of photos on there. And I did a search for women, and I looked through hundreds of photographs and found this picture. And I just thought I loved it. And it's in black and white. I ended up mocking up my own cover on Canva, which is a graphic design platform, and putting the title, putting the blurb, which is from Fiona, actually, the author. You just read her book. And I sent that to my publisher, and I said, this is what I envisioned for the cover. And colorized, of course. I didn't know how to do that. And they loved it. And that's what they went with. And so to answer your question, I don't know if these are aquacade swimmers. This is in the reflecting pool, which is, you can see the Trilon and Paris Fair behind it and the George Washington statue. So they are facing the government zone. And so according to this picture, the aquacade is all the way over there. The back of the photograph did not identify who they were. They could be aquacade swimmers. I doubt they are. I bet they're just models who were doing a photo shoot at the World's Fair. But I loved this picture because it showed such joy. And even though it doesn't necessarily represent who my two main characters are, and even if Vivi were one of these, Max is nowhere to be found. I just thought that it gave you a sense of place. You know, not everybody knows that the Trilon and the Perisphere are from the World's Fair. We used the World's Fair in the blurb to give that sense of place, but you know it's something. And then it also shows the joy and the time frame of the women by their outfits and their hair. So that's how this cover came to be. But thank you.
Have you considered a sequel where now Vivi goes up to the Golden Gate International Exposition head of the Aquacade for 1940?
I have not considered that one. I definitely left it open for a sequel because at the end, and this is not giving anything away, the two women visit, there's called a Westinghouse, the writing room, where people were allowed to go in and write letters, and Westinghouse would mail them to anywhere in the world. And I have my two characters writing letters to them, you know, to themselves that they would open in 10 years. So I could certainly pick off like where they ended up, which would be, you know, in 1949, which is such a different, you know, time frame post-war, and also whether or not when they were in their early 20s and had such ambitions for what they could become in lives, when reality actually set in, most women were not becoming that. Some were. Get Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Let's not get into that right now. So anyway, any other questions?
Well, again, I appreciate your taking the time to join us. Like, you know, I'm not a big one into romantic novels or, you know, particular things like that. I'm a real, you know, cut and dry history guy, but you really brought the characters to life for me. And I think you did a great job of, you know, capturing the period of time. And I thought it came across well. You know, you thought about the, you know, the efforts that they had. And, you know, you think about the whole studio system back then where, you know, people were just told where to go, what to do, and how to do it. You didn't have, you know, much say in your career. You just followed the studio bosses. You know, same thing at the newspaper or the college. You know, you want to work for the New York Times and your professor says, nah, you're going to go do this puff piece. You didn't have much choice, but, you know, both of them I thought came across as very strong characters that made more than the best of, you know, the old proverbial thing. They were handed some lemons and, you know, made lemonade. And I enjoyed the book. I thought it was really good. And again, I know Beth said she enjoyed it, and recommend it to folks. And even if you, you know, don't particularly care about the life struggles of the swimmers at the Aquacade, there's a lot of 1939, well, let's say trivia or factoids or things in there that you'll really enjoy it. And then in the back of the book, you didn't mention, by the way, to Susie, you did a really nice section on things for book clubs and, you know, how to discuss the book. How did that piece come about?
Yeah, and I'm gonna put my website into the chat because I do have on my website a whole section for further reading and information about the World's Fair, as well as information for book clubs. And I do attend book clubs on Zoom or Skype. I have a whole bunch of questions there that book clubs can use to launch their discussions.
Great. And by the way, I have 2 books in the 39th World's Fair, so you need to go out and buy the other one.
Okay, I will for sure. And thank you so much. It means so much.
I've sold 6 of them. Thanks.
Yeah, it means so much to me, Bill, that you're supporting this. It really is great, and I appreciate that. And I was explaining to one of my oldest sons in college, but my two younger boys who are in high school, I was telling them just now, okay, I have to go upstairs. I have to go do a talk. And I said, it's to a bunch of World's Fair nerd enthusiasts just like me. And so I was like, it's such a fascinating history. There's so much to just enjoy learning about. And it's just so cool to look back. it takes on this aura of being charming because it was so long ago and because people were dressed up in hats and gloves. But there's a lot of rich stuff that went on there, especially when you start learning about the Fair Corporation and Grover Whalen and all of the wheelings and dealings and the price increases and why there was a second year to the fair and all of that sort of stuff. So there's a lot to dissect. But thank you all so much for coming and sharing your Saturday. And
Thank you. Thank you, Susie.
Thank you, Susie. I enjoyed that very much.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
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 Bye, thanks.
So for everybody else, next week, Don's going to pick us up in the desert, get us out here to LA. And then again, for anybody else that would like to be a guest lecturer, or if you have somebody to recommend or whatever, I love it because it's less work for me to do every week. So thank everybody for being here, and look forward to seeing you folks again next week. And for the ones that they're indicated they're going to buy Susie's book, I think you will thoroughly enjoy it.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bill?
Yeah.
I'll just email you the reminder for the photos.
Yes, send me an email address that I can get back to you on, and I'll send it to you.
Okay, you'll have it in 5.
Okay.
And hey, Bill, before you cut the link also, I just wanted to, Joey, just leave note, Joey, when next week I've got an answer to your question regarding this guy. Remember?
Oh, yes. I was thinking about that guy all week.
I did some research, so I have an answer for you next week.
That's great. Thanks, Don.
No problem. We'll talk to y'all later.
See you later. Thanks, Bill. Bye-bye.
Everybody, remember to vote.
Oh, yeah.
Already did, vote.
Okay. Take care.